Meet Billy. In 5 years, Billy will have spent 605 days sleeping and 2.5 full days brushing his teeth, hopefully. He will have sat in traffic for 9 full days. Billy hates traffic. And in 5 years, he will have spent 433 days working. Social media will have taken up 152 consecutive days of his life. He will have walked 3,650 miles and spoken 29.2 million words, hopefully good ones. In 5 years, Billy will have spent 76 days eating and drinking. Billy loves dessert. 2.5 years out of the 5 will be spent consuming media, with 228 days spent watching TV. Billy is messy. He will have spent 152 days cleaning. And in 5 years, he will have spent roughly $40,000 on food, 40 days shopping, and 50 days socializing with the homies. Welcome to You in 5 years.
Okay, so we're picking up where we left off last week, and here's what we're doing in this series. We are asking the question, who do we want to be 5 years from now, right? Who will we be 5 years from now if we continue our present course? And who do you want to be in 5 years from now? Those are the two questions that we're getting after during this series. Like where is your current momentum taking you, right? And do we like that destination? Because if not, it's time to get off the train, like if we don't like where it's headed. So who will you become by 2031? That's the question that we're after in this series. And instead of like the usual New Year's resolution series and talking about, just what everybody else does, like, okay, in the next 12 months, I want to do this. No, what we're saying is, hey, that's not enough time to become the person I want to become. That's not enough time to do what we want to do. We're asking, who do I want to be and what do I want to accomplish over the course of the next 60 months? And we're setting on our hearts and on our minds something much higher, something greater, something better, and something much deeper. The title of this message today is Faith When Nothing is Falling Apart. Faith when nothing is falling apart. In the Old Testament book of 1 Kings, chapter 19, we find one of 3 passages that we are going to consider together today. And it's about a man named Elisha who would eventually become a prophet. And I say eventually because at this point, it's actually Elijah who is the prophet. In fact, he was the mightiest of the miracle-working prophets. That's what he's been called. No big deal, right? Of course, his shoes were big ones to fill, and God told Elijah in advance who was going to replace him. And so God said, hey, it's going to be this man named Elisha. I want you to go find him. Now, I'm sure that was confusing to Elijah when God told him that, right? Because the names sound so familiar, right? I'm sure he was like, really, God, you had to pick him? Couldn't it be Billy, right? Aren't people going to think I'm him and he's me and they're just going to be confused forever? And God's like, bro, just do what I tell you. Fine, right? And so we're going to see Elijah seeking out Elisha so he can let him know that he is going to be a part of the team and one day become a prophet. So that's our context, and we'll jump in and read it. So if you got a Bible, go to 1 Kings chapter 19 with me. If you don't have a Bible, of course, as they said on the video, we got that free YouVersion Bible app. You can follow along the live event that's happening right now. Also, all of this will be up here on the screen for you. But 1 Kings 19, verse 19 says this. It says, so he departed from there and found Elisha, the son of Shaphat. Like I knew you were wondering, I wonder who Elisha's dad is. It told us, Shaphat, okay? Who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen in front of him, and he was with the 12th. Elijah passed by him and cast his cloak upon him. So let's talk about this for a moment, because I noticed that none of you responded with a gasp when I read the part about Elisha having 12 yoke of oxen. Okay, that didn't seem to blow anyone away, and it should have. Because what we just learned about Elisha is that he is ridiculously wealthy. He is ridiculously wealthy. See, an oxen in that day would be the equivalent of a very expensive John Deere tractor, or a very costly combine, or some other kind of farming equipment that I don't know the name of, okay? And Elisha, he had 12 pairs of these. That means he had 24 of these expensive, fancy pieces of farming equipment. And how vast, by the way, do your land holdings have to be in order to necessitate 24 of them? You know, I mean, to just have one in that day would have been like a huge deal. And he's got one for every hour of the day. What's more is this, right? It tells us his dad's name, Shaphat. But what happens one day when dad passes away? Well, Elisha is like the heir apparent to this whole enterprise, right? This is a huge deal. This is a large responsibility, and this is a very big calling on Elisha's life. And here's the thing. Many of you will be called to be leaders in industry, in the community, in business, and you'll be successful, and you may even produce wealth, not just for yourselves as an end, but as a beginning to be a blessing to many people and do a great deal of good. And that's what we see in Shaphat and Elisha. And whether it's farming or banking or being an architect or city government or anything like that, whatever it may be, many of you will have it upon yourself to be like Shaphat. And some of you, even now, the seeds are going to be sown so that the oak tree can come out of the acorn of this message series. 5 years from now, 5 years, you could be in a completely different place when it comes to your vocation, when it comes to your career, when it comes to whatever place you find yourself in life, when it comes to your work and your wealth that you produce. You can do a lot of good with all of those things. So if you were thinking that 24 tractors is where you want to be in 5 years, then this message is for you, okay? Moving on, I also want to talk about Elijah throwing his cloak over Elisha, okay? Because it's kind of weird if you think about it. Elijah has walked for 4 days from where he met with God to now find Elisha out plowing in the field, right? And to Elisha, Elijah, he's a big deal, okay? He's larger than life. He is chiseled in stone on the Mount Rushmore of prophets, okay? This guy, he would have known about him. He would have maybe even idolized him on some level. And so Elisha, he's just out there just plowing, right? Just getting his heifer on, right? And it's just like another day for him. Right? It's just the same. It's just the next day, another day out in the fields. And all of a sudden, Elijah appears out of nowhere, runs up behind him, right? And he throws his cloak, his jacket on Elisha's shoulders. And then the Bible says he just walks off, right? He just walks away. Like, how weird, how quirky and weird is this dude, right? So now Elisha, who's plowing behind these oxen, he's like, I wasn't cold, but thank you, right? But you have to understand that this was just symbolic. It was a symbolic gesture, right? This is essentially Elijah. He just handed him a lightsaber and said, it's time for us to train. We're going to the Dagobah system, right? That's essentially what's happening. My Star Wars nerds will get me, okay? Now, let's be clear. This was an unpaid internship that he was just invited into. You know what I'm saying? Like the chance to be under his authority. He's like, hey, if you follow me, you will learn from me, you can be my disciple, you can be my pupil, and one day you too could become a Jedi master. And that's what Elijah is giving Elisha a crack at here by throwing symbolically his cloak over his shoulders. And Elisha knew full well what was being offered to him. And that's why the text says in the very next part, in the first part of the next verse, verse 20, he goes on to say this, and he left the oxen and ran after Elijah. And of course, he would have handed back the cloak, right? He's like, because he realizes this is not mine to keep yet. I know that I don't get this yet. That was just a ceremony. That was just symbolism. And then he goes on to say this in the rest of verse 20. He says, hey, let me go kiss my father and my mother, and then I'll follow you. Just let me say goodbye to mom and dad. Let me give them a kiss, and then I'll follow you. And so Elisha, he knew exactly what was going on. He knew exactly what was happening, what he was saying yes to. And let me just ask, like, you realize what he's walking away from, right? I mean, he's walking away from Shaphat Farms, right? From Shaphat Enterprises. He's walking away from Wayne Manor, literally. I mean, this guy, this is kissing the life that he knew and he loved, the future that was before him, all of it. Goodbye to follow Elijah, whose life was impressive for sure. Like, I'll give you that, but it was treacherous and it was hard. And it was dangerous. In fact, before this, he laid by a brook being fed by ravens, praying that God would just kill him. Just let me die, right? And it's one of my favorite passages. I've talked about it before because God's like, have you thought about a cookie and a sandwich and a nap, right? And I'm like, thank you, God, that you give us that permission to just take a nap and eat a snack. I love that, okay? And that is what Elisha has just accepted here, like on the spot. So the end of verse 20, Elijah responds by saying this. He said, go back again, for what have I done to you? In other words, he's like, yeah, that's fine. Go kiss mom and dad. Go kiss your parents. And make sure, buddy, that you count the cost. Count the cost before you deny yourself, before you pick up your cross and choose to follow me, to use the language of the New Testament. Make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into here. Make sure you understand that you are embracing sacrifice, that you are choosing to embrace a life where you're not in control, where you choose to follow Jesus. Make sure that you understand that full well before you come following me. Moving on, verse 21, it says this, and he returned from following him and took the yoke of oxen and sacrificed them and boiled their flesh with the yokes of the oxen and gave it to the people, and they ate. And he arose and went after Elijah and assisted him. Now, as we read this, what we're seeing is a resolute and decisive answer to Elijah's question about whether or not he understood what he was saying yes to. Because how does Elisha respond? He killed his tractors. Right? I mean, literally, he slaughtered the 2 pair of oxen that he had been plowing with. He barbecued them. They had a party. He ate with his friends. What just moments before represented his entire life, he's literally slaughtering it and eating it. This is pretty strong. It's pretty strong, decisive resolution. And so he follows Elijah, and the text tells us that he became his servant. That Elisha is going to go on as a servant to Elijah. And here's what I want you to see. 18 years go by. 18 years. Long enough to be born and graduate high school. Right? I mean, 18 years. And this guy, by the way, during those 18 years, we get one detail about Elisha's life over those 18 years. You ready for it? He poured water on the hands of Elijah. That's it. That's the only detail we get for 18 years of his life. He poured water on the hands of Elijah. His function was that of the one who provided the hand sanitizer, right? Like, I don't know if Elijah was a germaphobe, and so he'd be meeting with people and shaking hands, and then he turns around to Elisha, and Elisha like takes some, hand sanitizer out of his fanny pack, and right? Like, I don't know, but that's it. That's all we get for 18 years. Man, like, he could have been somebody. He was somebody, right? I mean, how many times during those 18 years did he think back on how life was at Shaphat Farms and just cringe at the notion that he felt 18 years of obscurity, 18 years as a servant, 18 years pouring water? We don't hear of a sermon he preached. We don't see a miracle he performed. He just merely was in the background role supporting the ministry of Elijah. 18 years. I mean, he's got Kanye in his head, like, 18 years, 18 years, right? I mean, he's just like, right? He's like, dude, this is taking forever. Well, after those 18 years, what happens? Finally, we start to get some details. They start to flow out to us a little bit as Elijah's life was nearing its conclusion. You see, God told Elijah in advance, hey, you're about to go to heaven. Your time on earth, your ministry here on earth as a prophet is about to end. And so the two of them began to walk to a solitary place where Elijah was going to go to heaven. But first, they had to cross a river. They come to this river, and when they came to it, Elijah just stopped at the river's edge. Now, after 18 years, I'm sure Elisha knew better than to ask questions, right? Like I'm sure he just assumed, well, if Elijah stopped, then there's probably a good reason for it, right? Like early on in his support role, he probably would have tried to help solve the problem. Like when he was young and fresh and green, he'd probably be like, okay, Elijah, here's my suggestion. I think we could do this, and we could get across this way. But I'm sure over time, those 18 years, over time, he just learned more and more to speak when spoken to. And so he just stops, and I'm sure that wisdom paid off when they arrived at the edge of this river, because Elijah, he just looked at the river, he took off his jacket, that mantle that he had once thrown onto the shoulders of Elisha, and he just smacks the edge of the river. He just smacks the water, right? Now, I gotta tell you, if you're new and you're like, this is weird, it's getting weird, okay? This is just the Bible. Okay, I'm just reading scripture to you guys. Like, if you think the Bible is boring, clearly you've never read it, okay? Because you read stuff like this and you're like, what in the world? He hits the river with his jacket, and the jacket divides the river in half. Like he's trying to one-up Moses and the Red Sea moment, right? He's like, I can do that, right? And then 2 Kings, we'll fast forward. 2 Kings, chapter 2, verse 9, the story continues. And it says this. It says, when they had crossed the river, Elijah said to Elisha, ask what I shall do for you before I am taken from you. And Elisha said, please let there be a double portion of your spirit upon me. A little cocky, a little bold for a hand sanitizer guy, right? I mean, bro, what have you done in these last 18 years? For a guy, but I gotta tell you, I actually love Elisha's request. Here's why. Let me tell you why. Because I hope that as you think of all of the great things that God has done in other people's lives and in the world and in your life, I hope that your request facing the future is the same thing, is this. God, would you do twice as much in the coming days? Right? And I hope that's what you're praying over your children. And I hope that's your prayer as you seek God every day in his word. And I hope that's what you're praying over your grandchildren. I hope you're saying, God, you've done great things before. Would you do it again? And not just that, would you double it? Would you double it, Lord? And I don't think that offends God. I really don't. In fact, I think that God's like, yes, finally some faith here. Right? I can work with that because that's God's heart all along for us. He wants to do abundantly and exceedingly more than you could ever ask, think, or imagine. And listen to me, the problem with praying small prayers is that you might actually get what you ask for instead of what God wanted for you all along. So Elijah, he considers what Elisha asked for. He is the mightiest of the miracle-working prophets. We know in his entire life that is recorded, he performed 14 different miracles. And that's what Elisha's asking for. He's asking for, hey, would you double that? I want double that. And just look at Elijah's response in verse 10. This is so good. Verse 10, here's how Elijah responds. He says this, and he said, you have asked a hard thing, right? If you see me as I am being taken from you, then it shall be so for you. But if you do not see me, it shall not be so. So Elijah, he's like, I don't know. You ask a hard thing. Let's see, 14 times 2. I got to carry the 1. And so 28 miracles? You ask a hard thing, right? Nevertheless, he says, if you see me when I die, if you see me when I am taken from you, okay, you will have the double portion. But if not, you won't. And it's like, nothing is ever simple with this guy, right? Like he's kind of like Yoda, just saying weird mystical things all the time, right? But I think at this point, he's just playing with Elisha a little bit. I think he's just kind of toying with him. And you got to think, like, from that moment on, Elisha did not blink one single time, right? Because if like the exact moment Elijah dies and he's blinking in that moment, he doesn't get the double portion. I mean, he's just walking around like this. He's like, I gotta see, right? I mean, this guy. But God had something so much stranger in store for Elijah than just dying like any ordinary person. It's very strange. There would be no dying, in fact, for Elijah. Because as the text continues, here's what we learn in verse 11. It says this, "And as they still went on and talked, behold, chariots of fire and horses of fire separated the two of them, and Elijah went up by a whirlwind into heaven." Of course he did, right? I mean, and we know that Elijah was just messing with Elisha, because how could you miss something like that, right? I mean, a whirlwind, a bunch of horses, and a chariot, and the fact that all of it is like blazing on fire. And this is so dramatically interesting. You can't even make this stuff up. Like, if you're like, well, I just think the Bible's all made up. Listen, it's too weird to make this up, right? Nobody is making this stuff up. This is way too dramatic. And the story continues, verse 12. "And Elisha saw it." That's important, because now what does he get? "And Elisha saw it, and he cried, 'My father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen.' And he saw him no more. Then he took hold of his own clothes, and he tore them in two pieces." Why? Out of respect, out of grief, out of reverence and honor for the one that he loved, Elijah, who he had given his life to following for the last 18 years. He would miss him until one day he could go to heaven, probably not nearly as spectacularly, right? And then watch this, verse 13. It says this, I love this. "And he took up the cloak of Elijah that had fallen from him, and went back and stood on the bank of the Jordan." Now, I need you to imagine this. Elisha is watching this whirlwind go by, and Air Horse One take off back into the sky, right? I mean, like all this craziness, and all of a sudden, as it's all coming to a close, out of the whirlwind comes what? Elijah's jacket. I mean, what a dramatic way to pass the torch. You know what I'm saying? Like what an incredible way to hand off that baton. And so what does Elisha do? Verse 14 tells us, it says this, "Then he took the cloak of Elijah that had fallen from him and struck the water, saying, 'Where is the Lord, the God of Elijah?' And when he struck the water was parted to the one side and to the other, and Elisha went over." This is the start of something new for Elisha. This is incredible. This is incredible. Come on, how cool is that, right? This is the apprentice becoming the master, right? And there is so much here for us to unpack. Like, that's a lot, okay? Like, if you're listening to this, you're like, that's very strange, right? There's so much here. So this story really has three movements, and that's what I want to share with you today. The three movements of this story, and I believe that this story has so much to speak to our lives as we seek to get to where we want to be in the next 5 years. What do I mean? Well, again, the title of this message is Faith When Nothing is Falling Apart. Why? Because falling apart requires a crisis. A crisis. And a crisis is an event that, if you think about it, proves that we are all capable of change. Because sometimes we think things like, oh no, I could never change. I could never do that. I just don't think I have what it takes. Well, if you had to, guess what? You would find a way. If you had to, you could find a way. Why do moms lift the weight of cars when their child is trapped underneath the car? Because they had to. There are stories and accounts of kids getting trapped and moms literally lifting the weight of the car and just the adrenaline and that moment of panic so that they could free their child. What could you do if you had to? That's the question. What could you do if you had to come up with a ransom? There's a podcast where they talk about different families who they're facing a ransom and the extreme things that they did and the creative ways that they came up with that ransom money. What could you do if you had to do it? What could you do? When you have to, you are completely capable of change. The question is, how do we change in the absence of a crisis? When nothing is falling apart. When there's no ransom and there's no little Timmy trapped under the car. Well, I think that we have to come to a place where we can generate an internal crisis even when we don't have the luxury of an external one. You know what I'm saying? Like Tony Robbins put it this way. I love this. He said, change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Whew. Let me read that again because that's for someone here today. Change happens when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change. Change hurts. That's why we don't like it, right? That's why it's so hard to start things. But we could do it if there was a crisis. So how do we generate a crisis when there is no crisis? Because I don't think that just staging or faking or manufacturing an internal crisis is the way to go, right? Like that's just not realistic, okay? But if you can generate an internal crisis because you think about the pain of staying where you are as opposed to the pain that is going to be going to get to where you want to go. And from this text that we just read, I see three different movements in Elisha's story that I think can help us with this. Okay? Three movements. If you're taking notes, this will be on the screen. But movement number one is this: drastic action. Right? Drastic action. It's going to take drastic action to get to where we want to be. Is Elisha not demonstrating drastic action when he chooses to light on fire and barbecue the yoke of oxen and eat with his friends? I mean, he is destroying his tractors. That is drastic, right? He rips a page straight out of Cortez's playbook. You know what I'm saying? Like, even though it was not until 1519 that Cortez made his men stand on the shores and watch the ships burn, the same ships that had brought them to this new land. And in the same way, we need to do like Cortez. Not the raping and the plundering and the pillaging, okay? That was not good, okay? It was barbaric and it was unspeakable what they did. But in the resolve, in the determination, in the choice to say we will die or we will succeed, but we will not retreat. That's what they were saying. Are you drastic in the action you are taking, or are you soft in your desire to change? Drastic action. It's called for. And I wonder if you're willing to do it because it is so necessary. Why? Why is drastic action so necessary at the beginning? Well, just go back to last week's illustration. If you were with us last week, remember that first domino. It's that first little tic-tac-sized domino that eventually has the enough power over time, 29, 1.5 times. It's the power of the compounding, right? Has the power to knock over, eventually, the Empire State Building of change in your life. It's the knocking over of the first domino. And oftentimes it requires drastic action. It's drastic to knock something over. Everything's set up and it's so nice and perfect and comfortable, blah, 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 but something's got to give. Something's got to give. Something's got to light that fuse, right? It's going to take a spark to get that fire going. And without the spark, you can pile up all the kindling you want, but it's not going to happen until that first spark of decision and that line is crossed over. And I realize this may be easier said than done, but in order to grow, it is necessary to overcome something called inertia. Inertia. You're like, I didn't think I was in science class today. Well, guess what? Welcome, okay? If you don't know what I'm talking about, we gotta talk about inertia. We gotta go way back to 1687 when our boy Isaac Newton published his book that established the 3 laws of motion and the law of natural gravity. And this is so interesting to me. Check this out. The first law of motion is what is described as inertia, the first one, the starting point, the beginning point is inertia, which is stated as follows. Check this out. Objects will remain at rest. Sound familiar? Objects will remain at rest or in uniform motion in a straight line unless compelled to change its state by the action of, get this, an external force. Drastic action. Maybe you're not getting it. The point is this. Everything in the universe wants to keep doing just whatever it's currently doing. It doesn't want to change. Everything is resistant to a state of change. We call that inertia. And the word inertia itself actually comes from the Latin word, get this, lazy or idle. Okay? Everything in the universe, that is to say, every object, the first law of motion states everything is lazy, which really makes so much sense, right? Our default thing is to just stay where we are. That's the default. Our default disposition is to not move, to not change, because the first law of motion states everything is lazy, everything is idle. And as your life goes on, the harder, by the way, it becomes to change. The longer you've been entrenched in your laziness, the easier it is to stay lazy, to stay idle, and that's why it is so difficult to change your life. Maybe that's why it's so difficult for some of you to even envision 60 months from now. You're like, 5 years. 12-month thing would have been way easier. This is why baptism is so important. Fully wet. This is a drastic thing to say to the whole world, I am soaking wet and saved, right? It's a drastic action. I remember the day of my baptism. It's hard to forget that. I am telling you, it's drastic to delete some numbers from your phone because the relationships on the other end of the line are dysfunctional. It's drastic to break up with someone who's not good for you, and together you are not glorifying God. And God's got something so much better for you. And God himself is your reward. And when you find what you need in him, then you can be brought into that relationship. It's drastic to say, here's a line in the sand. No more. No more. The time for half measures is over. Otherwise, 5 years from now, guess what? You're an older version of what you are right now, only exaggerated. We talked about that last week, did we not? Drastic action. That's the first movement in the story of Elisha that we see here. Number 2, the second movement in Elisha's story, if you're taking notes, is this. Number 2, steady progression. Just steady progression. Slow and steady. 18 years. What's he doing? Just pouring water. I could have actually done it, but then I have the mess to clean up. So just pouring water steadily for 18 years. Drastic action tips over the first domino, but then what do we need? We need consistency. We need to just show up and be slow and steady and consistent, even when it doesn't look like much is happening. Epictetus, the Greek philosopher, he put it this way: no great thing is created suddenly, any more than a bunch of grapes or a fig. If you tell me you desire a fig, I answer you, there must be time. First, let it blossom, then bear fruit, and then ripen. You see, whatever change you want that's drastic and dramatic and sudden and instant, if it's instantly visible, listen, it is likely not long-term sustainable. You want the process that God put in of slow and steady to win the race. Remember last week, right? The world record long jump. It's like 29 feet and 4 inches, right? And every one of us could do it in 12 steps. Just 12 steady, slow, consistent steps. Because God always works in the sowing and in the reaping seasons. Let me modernize it a little bit from Epictetus. okay, to someone more current. There's a guy named Darren Hardy. He's a philosopher and an author, and he wrote a book called The Compound Effect. Here's how he puts it. He puts it this way. I love this. He says this: it's time someone told it to you straight. You've been bamboozled far too long. There is no magic bullet, secret formula, or quick fix. You don't make 200 grand a year spending 2 hours a day on the internet, lose 30 pounds in a week, rub 20 years off of your face with a cream, fix your love life with a pill, or find lasting success with any other scheme that is too good to be true. It would be great if you could buy your success, your fame, your self-esteem, good relationships, and health and well-being in a nicely clamshelled package at the local Walmart, but that's not how it works. Come on, what's it going to take? What's it going to take? Day in and day out, keep sowing, keep watering, keep pouring, keep dreaming, keep planted, small groups, life decisions, Bible, Jesus, prayer, save, work, make the right choices, include the right people, have the right voices speaking into your life, and stay planted in the church. It takes the right things over time to get to where we want to be. John Maxwell said it this way. He said, improvement doesn't happen in a day, but it must happen daily. Doesn't happen in a day, but it must happen daily, consistently, slow and steady. You cannot be changed by tomorrow. You can't. But it has to happen daily if we are to get to where we want to be. And then number 3, the third and final movement in Elisha's story that we can learn from is this, and I'll invite the band. They're going to come back up, and we're going to wrap this up. But number 3, once there has been drastic action, followed by a steady progression, then you get to enjoy momentum. That's number 3, enjoy momentum. Isn't it interesting? The way Elisha eventually comes to a place where slow and steady, he's been filling up his life with all these small decisions, and then eventually comes to this dramatic place of momentum. It's just incredible to me. And by the way, that's why you should be in a small group. Those are going to start up here towards the end of the month. And if you're not in a small group, if you don't get people in your life to love you, to help you, to encourage you, people who can help spread the weight of your life around, to hold you up when you're weak, to speak life into you, then you need to be in a group. You need to be in a community if you are going to thrive. But here's the cool thing. All of this leads to momentum. Why? Why? Because inertia is a double-edged sword, isn't it? Inertia is a double-edged sword. Newton said things are either staying at rest, lazy, idle, but if you remember, what was the second part? Objects in motion stay in motion, and they do so in a straight line. So course correction and steering followed by compounded decision-making eventually leads you to a pretty spectacular thing, and that's, once more, called inertia. You see, a space shuttle uses more fuel in taking off just to get off the ground than it will use for the entire rest of the flight altogether. Because it's just got to break free from what's holding it down as an object in rest. But then it eventually becomes an object in motion, and at that point, it doesn't take nearly as much fuel to continue going. And that is exactly what is possible for you and for me as we make the right decisions. Eventually, we come to a place where the right things have been set in place, and they just continue. We just feel that momentum, and they just continue, consistent. So as I close, I want to tell you that, yeah, it's difficult to do drastic action. And steady progression, yeah, it's uncomfortable. And it may take a long period of time of not seeing any fruit produced. But once you get to this phase where you are enjoying momentum, you become unstoppable in Jesus' name. Question is, Do you receive it? Lord, may it be so. That today you would put it on our hearts to receive this, to receive your word. To begin to maybe for the first time take seriously your words. To take seriously what you have called us to something so much greater, so much better. To set our minds on higher things, on greater things. Things of you and what you've done in our lives and how you continue to be faithful in our lives. So meet us here today. Meet us in this moment. Just like Elisha and Elijah went off to a place of solitude at the end of Elijah's life. Would you just find us here? Maybe during this response time, this is just a moment of solitude, a place of solitude for us to just meet with you today, the living God. And the power of your Holy Spirit would be here filling this place, speaking to our hearts, lighting things up, giving us passions and desires in our life, Lord. Would you be our firm foundation today? If everything else around us is crumbling, if the ground beneath us is washing out, Lord, today, that we may place you in the right place, the rightful place, as the Lord of our life who is on the throne, that you would become our firm foundation to stand on. And that we would set our lives on a much different trajectory. That we would commit to saying yes to you, to doing hard things, to putting in the work, and to showing up, so that our lives may eventually be a reflection of Elisha's life. May it be so. As we respond today, you have your way with us. Have your way in our hearts. In Jesus' name I pray.